Embrace who you really are, son. And you will become a legend.
When the man comes around.
Well, guys, it's Kraven time, and the death of the Sony Cinematic Universe is here with Kraven the Hunter. This movie really was a movie. I can't believe this is how the Sonyverse is ending. Honestly, I don't know what I expected. It feels like a lot of stuff didn't really happen in this movie, and I don't know. At least they did actually have some comic book references, some comic book accuracy in it, and you know, they still kind of kept true to some of the characters, which was interesting, even though they didn't keep it exactly how it should be. Now, in this video, what we're going to be doing, of course, is reviewing the movie and breaking it down and just talking about the characters, because I feel like there's not much else to break down, because I didn't notice a lot of Easter eggs in it, because it was pretty standalone, other than some of the Spider-Man character references they made during it, and the characters that are related to Spider-Man appearing in it. Now, I mean, when I pretty much want to talk about the movie, I just want to say it wasn't that good. I've heard a lot of people say it was really good. They really liked it. And, you know, good for you. I think that's great. I just couldn't find the joy in it. So I will say some of the action scenes, which I thought there were going to be way more of, were pretty awesome to watch. Just a brutality of destroying people left and right. So the action scenes when it happened, awesome job. Aaron Taylor Johnson, great actor. The writing, though, was not it. It really felt off in so many scenes where the dialogue just felt clunky and it didn't really work. The backstory also felt very long. It was like the first quarter of the movie and it just felt like it was taking forever to get us to where we need to be. And when he was in the hospital and they were bringing him back to life, it was so odd to see him say all these animal symbols, all these different things to kind of show the spirit within him, which it feels like they've changed up his comic origin a little bit, where he does get a potion in the comics to give him the enhanced durability, enhanced strength, enhanced speed, but this way it looked like he was more connected to animals and nature, but they didn't really explain it at all in the film, which really didn't help its case. And like I said before, I was actually surprised to see some of the comic accuracy in this when it came to some of the characters, like the Foreigner, the Chameleon eventually got there, Calypso somewhat, and Kraven, again, it was like a mostly comic accurate until you got him to be more of an anti-hero than a criminal. But, you know, they still had those pieces in there. With some of those characters having some of those comic accuracy parts to them, it really did feel like they took one aspect of a character and then made that their whole identity, ignoring all the rest of the lore that went with them. Like Kraven, you know, they're like, oh, this guy's a hunter, but he doesn't hunt animals. No, he hunts humans only because he's an anti-hero and he saves animals. He did that for some parts, but like, ugh. It didn't really work. It didn't feel like, some parts did feel like Kraven, then some didn't. It was like a mix back and forth where I was like, okay, that felt like Kraven. Okay, that didn't. But also, I don't expect much from Sony anymore. The only things they've really gotten right were the Spider-Man movies, because obviously with Tom Holland, they were with Marvel kind of keeping it with the MCU, and then the Spider-Verse movies, they did a fantastic job on. It was so good. They're so good. But the other live action stuff just have never really hit. Venom was the best trilogy out of all the other spin-offs, but obviously Venom still wasn't amazing by any means. And if you love Venom, that's great. I'm still kind of mad that we never got the spider symbol on Venom, because that's literally who Venom is in the comics. But enough about that, because I feel like I could just ramble on about what I didn't like about the Sonyverse for quite a bit. And now let's talk about how it started with him going to a Russian prison to take out the Kirov gang. And the thing is, it was cool. You know, he breaks into prison, he gets in there, takes the guy out, gets a brutal fight scene really quickly of him just stabbing the guy, and then it's just him jumping and running all over the walls to get out of there. Until he meets that wolf, where he just makes eye contact with it, it backs down, and this is where I thought, okay, so he has some connection to animals. And they did this a couple times during the film. He does it with a leopard later on, when near the end of the movie. He does it with the buffaloes he meets, falcon, or an eagle, I'm not exactly sure which kind of bird it was, and then also at the end of the movie, he does it with a bear. But again, they never explain this. He just kind of has this connection with animals that they don't explain at all. Like when we're seeing his flashbacks, and we're going into, you know, what happened to him as a kid when he had his mother die. His father took him and his brother out on a hunting trip to take out this beast of a lion who was killing like 3,000 men. And the thing is here, this is where it kind of shows that Kraven cares about animals, because he doesn't want to hurt the lion. He makes eye contact with it, it stands down, but as soon as his father starts to shoot, it attacks Kraven and almost kills him. Like, that was pretty brutal. I wasn't expecting to see this teenager get almost ripped apart by a lion. Not a horrible scene for CGI when it came to the lion. Now, when it came to terrible CGI, that's more of the rhino aspect of things, but at least, you know, some of the stuff looked pretty decent. Now, when they were doing this and they were in Africa, they introduced us to Calypso. And in the comics, Calypso is a voodoo priest. She's a psychopathic woman who is associated with Kraven the Hunter. In the comics, she was with Kraven when he was going after Spider-Man, and she liked that rage and helped further his hatred for him to make Kraven want to hunt Spider-Man even more, his biggest prey. Now here in the movie, she's using tarot cards, and her aunt or grandma, I can't exactly remember who it was, comes into the scene and talks about how she's not using the tarot cards right, how they aren't just a game and how they actually do things. And the whole things when they're pulling out the cards is pretty much showing the accident of Kraven getting mauled by the lion and then becoming a hero, where Calypso gets given a potion, which if someone drinks it, it will save their life. Now in the comics, it is a magical potion that she does give to Kraven to give him his power. So that part is actually accurate to the comics, which I was surprised, because in the trailer, it made it look like the lion's blood is what gave him the powers. However, the potion in the comics gives him enhanced strength, durability, longevity, but it doesn't seem to give him powers about dealing and, helping with animals. However, in the comics as well, he is a master tamer, so he is able to tame animals. So that could be maybe the idea they were going with, how he's able to work with animals to get them to back down from him. But the way they showed it didn't really put that point across at all. And that's kind of some of the things I am disappointed about the Sony movies, is they do stuff like this where they set things up and they don't explain it. So it's just like, oh yeah, you're just supposed to assume what happens here, and it makes a movie feel like it's not flowing properly when they do this. And, there's a reason why the Sony-verse failed. However, in this Africa scene too, they talk about how Dimitri is Kraven's half-brother, which in the comics, that is exactly the same as well. Dimitri is his half-brother. They're still keeping some aspects to it. Now, when it comes to Chameleon, they don't really keep him the same as the comics, where in the comics, when he was growing up, his whole family hated him because he was a bastard. He wasn't supposed to be there. He's the half-son that his father had with one of their servants. Now, one of the issues here too is that they changed it to make it so Dimitri is Kraven's weakness because he wants to do everything to protect his brother. And in the comics, that is not the case at all. He was abused. They did not like him. And then eventually Dimitri left, abandoning the family because, he wasn't welcome there. He didn't say goodbye, and he ended up finding people to train him to be a master impressionist. And that's how he became the chameleon in the end. So they kind of got rid of that entirely, but we'll talk more about him at the end because they actually did tease the actual chameleon there. Now, after Kraven gets attacked by that lion and Calypso saves him with the potion, kind of making him as this chosen one type arc, making him become that anti-hero in a way, Father talks about how he's not supposed to show weakness, because that's what gives people the opening to get him. So if he doesn't show that weakness, he can become stronger, which they kind of play throughout the whole film, that Dimitri is his weakness, and that's how they end up cornering him in the end, which this was just a foreshadow for that to happen later on. Now, his father also was able to kill that lion and take its head, which really pissed off Kraven, because Kraven did not want to kill that lion. And the thing is, again, Kraven is a hunter. He hunts the prey. He literally goes to Africa in the comics to hone his skills. But in this, he does none of that. He goes back to Russia to start training in the woods, seeing us a little montage of him jumping and running through the forest, running with a deer, but not attacking any of the animals like a hunter normally would. Kind of just showing that he's one with nature rather than anything else. And when Kraven was in Russia and he saw those buffaloes being killed by poachers, he helps them. Takes down some hunters, which is a pretty cool move. But what I noticed too in this is they really, really like having Kraven stare into the eyes of animals like he's controlling them. Again, he's a master tamer in the comics, but they don't actually say anything about that, and they make it look like his powers are helping him connect to these animals. Now, we got more buffaloes in the present day because they really like using those buffaloes in this film. It was pretty cool to watch him take down those hunters and then go follow the guy back to London and take him out there. Like, those were cool moves of him being an anti-hero and an actual hunter. Like, those are things Kraven would do, hunt. You mess with him, he's gonna hunt you down and kill you. Like, those are cool things, but again, like I said in the review, the lines just weren't hitting. But as an important note, Kraven has hunted hunters before when they were disrespecting the animals they're poaching. So he has been doing this in the past. So this part is actually semi-accurate in comparison to some other stuff in this film. Now, one of the things they really do here is they show his sense of hunting, how he can hunt anyone. By using the tarot card that he got from Calypso in the very beginning, he used it to track her down. I do wish they showed him doing more hunting things rather than, oh, I have this one item, I know where you are exactly. Like, it would have been nice to see him do kind of more like going around looking for prints, looking for ways, smelling different things, just to figure out where he's supposed to go. Now, during this part of the movie too, we did get a Daily Bugle reference. They show a newspaper with them talking about the hunter going around, and they have Daily Bugle. So, it's just cool to get that little reference to the Daily Bugle. I think we've gotten one in almost every one of these Sony projects, so at least it's there. Now, one of the things that was kind of interesting was that the reason he went on and started hunting is because his father was the person that put evil into the world, and it was his job to take it out. They really revolved around him being this anti-hero that just takes down evil, and then having Calypso join his side. Rather than being a psychopath and a voodoo priestess, she's just a lawyer. And then he wants to use her to find more criminals. So they brought her in a different way, but I find out whenever they do kind of more modern movies, they always turn people into like lawyers or cops, anyone that can track down people, but they kind of get rid of some of their comic origin stuff. I'm hoping with like the new way they're going into some of these more movies now with DCU, with Marvel, that they might actually start doing more weird and wackier stuff that kind of matches what a comic book would be. Because comic books are weird. They have so many weird things going on in them. And the thing is, in the comics, Kraven is weird. The guy literally offs himself after Kraven's last hunt because he was able to beat Spider-Man, he completed his goal, and he could prove that he was stronger. So yeah, he completed everything and he decided his life was over. And then after he did die, his family brought him back to life, and he was so pissed off about that, he was just in like a depressed mood for the rest of his career because all he wanted to do was die again. He wanted to get rid of it. And the funny part is, because of the whole way he was resurrected, he couldn't unless Spider-Man did it. Eventually down the road, he would set up this huge hunt that went on in Central Park with Spider-Man and other animal-themed villains, where his actual son would take him out, and that would be it, and his son would take up Kraven the Hunter, which I think right now in the comics, his son is Kraven the Hunter, and Sergei is gone. Because I did read that comic, I do remember that happening. But I digress. Now, as we go forward into the movie, we did get the Rhino, and this is one of the cheesy lines I was talking about, where it's like, don't you want to know why they call me the Rhino? And he takes off his like little serum thing he has on him, and he starts morphing into him. So whatever he has powers, and these drugs are suppressing those powers as he walks around with a backpack. Such a weird thing to do. Like, I don't understand why they put that in this movie. Why didn't they just make him a guy in a rhino suit? That's what he is in the comics, and I feel like they always kind of go away from that. They always make him like this weird powers, and they don't really want to use that suit. The closest thing we got to a suit was at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where the guy's name is Rhino and he's wearing a robotic suit. It's, again, not exactly the Rhino at all, but at least I was one step closer than this. Because in the comics, he just has a suit that gave him the strength, durability, and all that, and then eventually got grafted to him, and then eventually got taken off of him, and then he got a new suit. So, like, he never really mutated, and I'm just surprised it never went the suit way. I feel like it makes sense for what they're doing in the Sony universe. Give him a suit, make him a villain, there you go. Now, after this, we pick up with Kraven and Dimitri's father, where he calls Dimitri the Chameleon, where in the comics, the Chameleon is a master of disguise and a brilliant method actor and an impressionist, and they really do show that in this with him talking multiple times in other voices. They don't show the actual disguise part, but they mainly focus on the impressionist part. And at one point too, he did have powers because he was taking a serum like Kraven the Hunter's that did give him physical strength and longevity. It wasn't exactly the same, so he still had less strength and all that, but it did keep him alive. That's why they're pretty old in the Marvel comics. Now, one of the things I noticed in this too is that they made Rhino a mob boss, where in the comics, he's always more of an underling. He's not usually running the organization, he's usually just working for other people. I mean, I don't know why they made him the mob boss, but at the same time, they gave him like Rhino power. So I feel like they didn't really know what they were doing, especially when the movie, apparently Rhino was only going to show up at the very end, and they reshot the movie to make him more in it. I really don't, I don't think they actually knew what they were doing with Kraven the Hunter. Now, once Dimitri gets taken by the Rhino and everything else, we did get a pretty badass scene of Kraven jumping off the roof of the building, climbing down and chasing after the guys. Like, that was cool. But you know what it made me feel like? It made me feel like I was watching something of Captain America, but with Kraven the Hunter, as he runs after the cars and jumps off the buildings. And it feels like this movie really increased his powers like tenfold, where normally in the comics, he would have to continuously take in the potion so that he would maintain his increased strength and durability and longevity. But in this, one time was enough, and now he's just pretty much a super soldier. And this is kind of where we start learning more and more stuff about what's going on in the film and the other characters introduced. Because Kraven goes and falls for the trap to take out his enemies, gets RPG'd, a building falls on him. Like a pretty cool action set piece of him being a hunter. We find out that the Foreigner is the one hunting him. Now in the comics, the Foreigner is an assassin and mercenary. And it was established that he was actually apparently married to Silver Sable before, and that eventually they divorced. This character, his powers or a hypnotic blackout. So he stares at your eyes and it makes it look like he teleports because you're kind of blacked out for a moment as he moves past you, which they do in the movie, and they don't reference at all how it works until like near the end, where they do mention, you know, his eyes and staring at you. Because it was interesting to see that they introduced this character, don't say anything about it, his powers are mysterious, everything else about it just makes no sense, and then eventually by the end of the movie they're like, oh yeah, they put one line to drop about his eyes and how if you stare into them, you go into a blackout. So, interesting character they put in this movie. I feel like they just picked a character, threw him in because they needed someone else to go against Kraven. But eventually, he didn't make it out there alive. He got taken out, but not before he put the scare on Kraven. But we'll get to that in a moment because we also got to talk about the Rhino in this moment as well, where the Rhino drops the bomb that he got his powers from Miles Warren, aka the Jackal. So another Marvel reference for another Marvel Spider-Man villain, which I bet you any money they were going to set up a Jackal movie. 100%. There's no way they weren't. I feel like that's exactly what they would do. Another character that would definitely not work without Spider-Man because his whole character revolves around the clone saga. Spider-Man being cloned, having Ben Reilly and Kane. Like, I feel like that's exactly something they would have done. But eventually we do get to the Rhino and Foreigner versus Kraven the Hunter fight, where they go to take him down in Russia, which is pretty much what we saw in the trailer of with him going against the Rhino. That's all at the end. It's all at the end of the movie. It was a cool action set piece to get the brutal fight with the bear traps, him taking out the Rhino's men, just like we saw in the trailer. And like, that was awesome. Like, I feel like that stuff should have been way earlier in the movie because they put it in the trailers, but this is movie marketing and they always put the end fight in the trailer, and it's always the most annoying thing. Now, this is where we get into the fear part, where the Foreigner puts some fear into Kraven by injecting him with a drug that'll make his fear come out, which his fear is spiders. And I bet you any money they were setting up Spider-Man here because Kraven's scared of spiders, and that would have been his reason to help maybe Morbius and Vulture after that Morbius post-credit scene to make a team to go against a Spider-Man. Again, Sony-verse makes no sense, but I bet you any money that's what they were trying to do. And then the MacGuffin of the film comes out where Kraven's about to die, and turns out Calypso had more of the potion. After the whole movie, she's like, I have no more, I have no more. She had more. Of course she did. And then they just give it to Kraven and he's back up. Like, honestly, they didn't even need to put that in the film. Like, they could have just had him get back up. He survived and then go on his way. But I guess they just wanted a reason to be like, hey, we have more of these potions here. We can do more with it. Maybe that was a setup as well for something in the future to have the potion give someone else powers. And this is where we get the attack of the buffaloes going against Rhino and his men, taking them out. Where it looks like, again, like Kraven has a way with animals. Could be him being a master tamer, but also I feel like it's just them being able to communicate with animals that, again, they never explained. And I will say that over and over because it was very frustrating. And then he takes on the fight to Rhino himself. There's a line in the movie that says, gosh, you're really heavy, when the Rhino was on top of Kraven. And honestly, that felt like something Spider-Man would say. It feels like, hey, this is a nice Peter Parker line. Let's give it to Kraven. That's exactly what it felt like. Now, the Rhino versus Kraven fight, the CGI was pretty rough, and the fight was very anticlimactic of Kraven just getting his ass beat at first until he was able to get the upper hand on Rhino and getting him pretty much just trampled by buffaloes. That's all. And that was really it. That was the whole fight. Nothing really big happened. It feels like really nothing big happened in this movie at all. And they killed two Marvel villains. Gotta love the way Sony does with these things. Now, the ending was somewhat surprising because it definitely felt like they were setting up more movies to come. As Kraven finds out that it was his father that sent the Rhino after him, so he goes to track him down. And we find out the reason his father set this trap was because the Rhino was coming after him. So instead of getting Kraven to help him, he sent the Rhino after Kraven, knowing Kraven would take him out. So gotta love the way he set this up. Father using his son as he pleases, and it all came down at the end where Kraven uses animal master powers to send a bear after him. And that's one character gone again, which then brought us to another scene where we had the Chameleon being set up for something else down the road. Because Dimitri became a mob boss just like his father, taking over the organization, and he apparently went to go see a doctor in New York, which could be another reference to the Jackal because the Rhino might have given him that idea to go see this doctor. Now he has the chameleon face like he does in the comics as well that helps him transform into different people. So the Chameleon has now hit his comic accurate self at the very end of the movie, definitely setting up something for him going in the future because he's become this mob boss and he's taken over, and now he's not going to be a coward any longer. So there's another thing set up. And then after all this, Kraven finally becomes the comic accurate look of Kraven the Hunter. We got in all the marketing, we got in everything else. The poster is literally him sitting on the chair with the lion jacket, and he gets it at the very end of the movie from his father. Gotta love the way they use this marketing to tease the movie Kraven the Hunter, where he doesn't actually really become the character until the end of the movie. So yeah, that was Kraven the Hunter. I feel like they didn't really know what they were doing with this movie. Like, they connected the Rhino, killed him off in the first movie. I figured they were going to use him somehow for the Sinister Six because he is the Rhino. But nope, they got rid of him. They introduced the Foreigner, who I didn't know was in this movie, and I honestly didn't know the character very much until after it, and I had to look it up to be like, okay, who is this character? What is he meant to be? And again, he's just a mercenary assassin, so cool, I guess. And then having Chameleon and Kraven be in it, and both of them not really become the comic accurate selves until the end of the movie was an interesting take. I feel like what they could have done in this movie too is like not done the backstory to Kraven, just had him running around being a hunter, not an animal protector, but being a hunter, hunting animals, but also hunting down criminals who were like a proper hunt. Where it's like this person has abilities or is a master assassin or something, some way of him using his skills in order to take down these people because he just does it for the thrill of the hunt. I really don't understand why they made him an anti-hero. I mean, Sony's been doing this with all their villains. They just keep making them anti-heroes when they're literally villains. But they just, I don't know what they were doing. There's a reason why the Sonyverse failed, and it's just because you're doing all these Spider-Man characters without Spider-Man. All their lore are very heavily tied to this one character, and removing him kind of changes it completely. Hopefully going forward, maybe we'll see some of these characters return as their proper Spider-Man villain characters in the Marvel MCU with Tom Holland or another Spider-Man. But honestly, we won't know until that happens, and it feels like it's a long way from any of them coming back. Even though I feel like probably Venom will be the first one to come back because of the piece of the symbiote they teased at the end of No Way Home. Have you seen Kraven the Hunter? What did you think of it? What other comic book Easter egg references did you notice that I might have missed? And how do you feel about the Sonyverse now being over? I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Make sure to hit the like, hit the subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot, and you get to stay up to date with all my Marvel and DC breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.